In the shadows of the Middle Ages, one mind rose like both sword and cross. Thomas Aquinas was not just a silent monk. He was the invisible strategist who taught emperors how to rule and popes how to legislate. He turned doubts into certainties, mysteries into systems, faith into power. His legacy is so vast that even today, governments, universities, and churches echo his voice. But the truth is that Thomas's mind not only guided the church, it shaped the very destiny of the West. Get ready. What you're about to hear is not dead history, but the flame that still burns in the foundations of the modern world. You are on the channel Faith and Power. Subscribe now. In the heart of the 13th century, when castles stood as iron walls and alliances were sealed with blood and marriage, Thomas was born, the most unlikely son of a lineage that dreamed of thrones, not cloisters. He came into the world in Roccasecca, a fortress carved into the Sicilian cliffs under the vigilant gaze of the empire. His family, the Counts of Aquino, did not harbor small ambitions. They wanted generals, rulers, cardinals, not silent monks. To them, Thomas was an heir to battles and treaties. But the story that begins here would not be written with swords, but with words that would echo across centuries. From an early age, Thomas carried something unsettling. While his brothers fought over lances and lands, he sought silence. In the castle, where the clang of weapons echoed, his eyes rested on parchments. It was unusual. The mind of that boy wandered to places neither soldiers nor nobles dared to tread. There was in him a disturbing mystery, as if his soul were destined to fight on an invisible battlefield. His father, Landulf of Aquino, looked with suspicion at this boy who seemed unmoved by the glitter of military power. Still a child, Thomas was sent to study at the Abbey of Monte Cassino, the legendary monastery founded by Saint Benedict. There, among monks who saw prayer as a weapon and silence as a shield, his mind found fertile ground. Every corner of that monastery carried centuries of prayer and discipline. Thomas walked through ancient corridors, sensing that there was more power there than in any feudal throne. And perhaps he was right. Monte Cassino was more than a spiritual refuge. It was a forge of ideas that would shape kings and popes. But destiny never leaves the mind at peace. While the monks saw him as a diligent student, his family saw his presence in the monastery as a political investment. Their hope was clear. Thomas should become abbot, the leader of Monte Cassino, a position that would bring prestige and influence to the Aquino family. The boy, however, felt a different calling. His hunger was not for titles, but for truth. A truth he could not yet name, but that already burned like a secret fire within him. When he arrived in Naples to further his studies, that fire became a flame. There, Thomas encountered texts that would make him an enemy to some and a beacon to many others. Aristotle, the forbidden Greek philosopher whose works slept in Arab libraries, was awakening through the pens of translators. For a young monk in training, it was like discovering a parallel universe, reason and faith, world and eternity, body and soul. The tension exploded. Naples did not merely educate him, it set his soul ablaze. It was there that the definitive rupture occurred. Thomas, heir of nobles, rejected his family's plans. He did not want to become a powerful abbot, but chose instead to join the Dominican order. Mendicants who walked barefoot, preached in the squares, and defied the pomp of the powerful. To the Aquino family, this was more than rebellion. It was betrayal. How could their son, born to rule, choose to become a beggar? It was like turning gold into dust. The reaction was brutal. His brothers, hardened soldiers, were ordered to bring him back by force. Thomas was kidnapped by his own family and locked inside the castle as a prisoner. There, within the stone walls where he had once played, he endured the captivity of his faith. His relatives tried everything, arguments, promises, even carnal temptations. History tells that a woman was sent to his chambers to break his resolve. But instead of yielding, Thomas seized a burning brand and drove her away. With the fire, he traced a cross upon the door and sealed his decision. Nothing would tear him away from his vocation. That moment was not mere youthful defiance. It was Thomas's first act of intellectual warfare. He was not only resisting his family, but the entire mentality of an age in which religion and power were inseparable. By choosing the Dominicans, he declared that faith could not be shackled to noble interests. His mind was beginning to rise as a wall against the world's dominion over the church. The boy from Aquinas was becoming a combatant in a battle greater than any army. At last, defeated by the young man's determination, his family relented. Thomas was released and left to follow the Dominicans, but he did not leave unscathed. He carried with him the marks of an imprisonment that did not break his body but strengthened his soul. Every stone of that castle was a reminder that his life would be a confrontation. The boy who was meant to command warriors now walked as a soldier of the mind. The heir of the throne of Aquinas had become, against all expectations, the freed prisoner of Christ. And thus ends the first chapter of his saga, a young man who dared to trade crowns for books, swords for parchments, inheritance for faith. Little did his captors know that his obstinate silence would turn into thunder, resounding through the centuries as a voice no empire could silence. Thomas, now freed from the prison of his own family, sought neither glory nor titles. He sought wisdom. His path led him to Paris, the feverish heart of ideas, where the university resembled a battlefield fought with black robes instead of armor. There, masters debated like generals, and parchments were their banners. The young Dominican carried in his eyes the flame first kindled in Naples, Aristotle. Not the domesticated Aristotle, but the one rediscovered through Arab and Jewish commentators, crossing centuries to provoke Latin monks. The burning question echoed through the corridors. Can human reason touch the mystery of God without profaning? It among the masters who would shape this flame was Albert, called the Great, the old alchemist of natural sciences, who saw in Thomas what others mocked, a silence that thought. A nickname spread through the corridors as a taunt. The dumb ox, nothing more convenient for those who underestimate. But Albert pronounced the sentence that would overturn the novice's reputation. This ox will bellow so loud that his voice will fill the world. Classes with Albert led Thomas to Cologne and then back to Paris, not as a shadow, but as a mind-in-command formation. In the cloisters, Averroë's commentaries on the single intellect and the supposed double truth sounded like siege trumpets. For some, philosophy could say one thing and faith another without conflict. Thomas saw an abyss. If truth is one, it cannot divide itself into two hostile realms. The task, then, would be colossal, to translate Aristotle into the Latin of the Gospel without betraying either. In the disputation halls, questions were hurled like darts. The master posed a problem, the opponents lined up objections, the respondent raised an argument, and finally came the resolution. The young friar learned this choreography with military precision. When he began to write, his pen marched in the same order, strong objections, clear distinctions, answers that seemed to open a window in a stone wall. Thus emerged the method that would make his Summa rise like a cathedral of reason at the service of faith. But what was so dangerous about Aristotle? The physics of motion, causality, substance, and accident, all of it, if read without guidance, could become a battering ram against doctrine. Some feared that the eternity of the world would be decreed in lectures, that the individual soul would dissolve into a single intellect, that providence would yield to blind necessity. Thomas responded, with the most surprising weapon, respect. He took the pagan philosopher seriously, acknowledged his truths, and then drew the boundaries where revelation speaks louder. With him, secondary causes could operate without expelling the first cause. Creation, even if time had a beginning, did not depend on clocks, but on the absolute dependence of every being. The soul, fully the form of the body, remained personal, destined for the beatific vision. Against Averroes' interpretation, he raised the hammer of a luminous principle. Truth does not oppose truth, and grace elevates nature without abolishing it. For minds weary of false conflicts, it sounded like the trumpet of dawn. The rumors spread. Some accused the Dominican of Christianizing a pagan, of dressing a foreign soldier in a bishop's robe. Others, however, perceived something deeper. Thomas was not using Aristotle as a weapon against the Bible, but as a tool to read the creation that the Bible itself proclaims. If the Word became flesh, why could truth not also dwell in the forms of the world? The answer, still timid in the corridors, would soon be proclaimed fiercely in public debates. One afternoon, at the close of a disputatio, a student approached him with cutting insolence. He wanted to know if faith was nothing more than poetry for the people, while philosophy was science for the strong. Thomas lifted his gaze with the gentleness of one who does not fear. He answered that faith does not diminish reason. It heals it. He said that the will loves the good that the intellect recognizes, and that grace is not a mask, but a medicine. The hall, once noisy, fell silent. A new kind of courage had entered the scene, intellectual courage that does not flee from the light. Yet the city did not sleep. In taverns and chapels, lists of suspect propositions circulated, and the atmosphere of surveillance thickened. There were forbidden treatises, anonymous denunciations, monks who feared that faith was being submitted to the new Aristotelian fashion. Thomas pressed forward with steady steps, but each page he wrote seemed like another rung on the gallows ladder. The rebel student had chosen a greater risk than abandoning his family's honors. He had dared to unite reason and revelation before a public thirsty for blood. In the silence of his cell, by a fading candle, he aligned theses that seemed like the pillars of a bridge. From being to essence, from cause to end, from act to potency. He knew the crossing would be attacked from every side. Still, he wrote, because if God is the source of being, then every true truth leads to the altar. And Thomas resolved to lead multitudes there. With patience, he would sow victories that endure. Paris had been his testing ground. Now the stage grew larger. The church, uneasy before heresies and philosophical winds, needed voices capable of speaking with strength, clarity, and authority. Thomas Aquinas, still young, was called not merely to teach, but to build something greater, a synthesis that would uphold the edifice of faith amid intellectual storms. Repeating formulas was not enough. A new architecture was needed, one strong enough to confront both the skepticism of scholars and the simplicity of the faithful. Thomas's pen became hammer and chisel. It was in this context that he began writing his monumental work, the Summa Theologiae. It was not just a book, it was a map to eternity. Each question opened like a portal, each objection received the weight of reason, each answer illuminated like a flash in a darkened room. Thomas did not write to impress. He wrote to order the universe before God. In it, the entire cosmos found its place. Angels, men, virtues, vices, sacraments, government, and law. All converged on a blazing center, Christ. The work was a cathedral raised in words, more solid than stone. His theology did not remain confined to cloisters. Rome began to listen. Popes consulted him, bishops quoted him, emperors grew suspicious. The friar with the serene gaze had become an involuntary counselor to powers greater than himself. While some still viewed him as an academic, others realized his pen was a sword sharper than lances. In debates against heretics, his calm disarmed. Against sophists, his clarity destroyed. He did not shout, yet his voice echoed like thunder. That does not fade, but none of this was simple. The church itself wavered. Amid councils and disputes, there were those who wanted to restrict Aristotle, burn commentaries, silence voices. Rome feared the boldness of philosophers who threatened the simplicity of faith. Thomas, however, dared further. He declared that reason, guided by the light of faith, was not an enemy but an ally. This was not a concession to fashion, it was prophecy, and prophecy always meets resistance. In his lectures, students from all over Europe gathered, like pilgrims seeking an oracle. Young friars traveled long roads to hear his answers. Many did not grasp the full depth, but they felt the strength of one who spoke with absolute conviction. Some said listening to him was like watching a wall rise before a storm, each stone placed with precision until nothing could topple it. Others felt discomfort, as if each word were also a sentence, against their intellectual laziness. Thomas was not merely a master, he was the silent judge of every mind before him. During this time, he also composed the Summa contra Gentiles, directed toward those who did not share the Christian faith. There his reasoning shone as a bridge between worlds. He did not appeal solely to Scripture, but to truths accessible to every human being. It was missionary theology, but also intellectual diplomacy. To Arabs, Jews, and philosophers, the work proclaimed, "Truth is not the possession of one people, but the reflection of God." This boldness revealed that Thomas did not intend to confine faith, but to project it to the farthest reaches of human thought. Recognition grew, but so did enemies. Some accused him of domesticating mystery, of turning the divine into an equation. Others claimed his order and logic were cold, distant from the fire of the saints. Yet those who knew him understood. His mind was rigorous, but his heart burned. Among his most beautiful works were Eucharistic hymns, written with near mystical devotion. Words that still resound at altars today, proving that his theology was not calculation but prayer transfigured into thought. Rome could no longer ignore him. Counsel was requested, opinions copied. Universities cited him as authority. Slowly, his voice was no longer that of a professor, but one that shaped the official faith. The forge was lit, and in it the raw iron of philosophy was transformed into a sword for the church. Thomas had become the craftsman of an edifice in which every stone was an argument, every arch a distinction, every stained glass window the clarity of the spirit. Yet in that same fire, tension grew. If his ideas supported, they also provoked. The empire saw in Thomas's mind a force that could limit its ambition. The church, divided between prudence and boldness, kept him under watchful eyes. He wrote without ceasing, as one who knows time is short and the battle urgent. His writings were sent, debated, criticized, defended. With each line, the truth solidified. Thomas was no longer just a student. He had become the architect of an entire civilization, and when Rome finally listened, it was not merely the sound of pages turning. It was the roar of a mind transforming destiny. Thomas Aquinas did not conquer territories with armies, he forged kingdoms with words. And each word inscribed was a brick in a fortress that would endure for centuries. The empire of the mind was rising before all eyes. The 13th century was a minefield. Heresies spread like wildfires, consuming villages and cities. From southern France came the Cathars, preaching that the material world was the work of evil. In universities, Averroists whispered that faith might be an illusion for the masses, while philosophy held a hidden truth. On the throne, emperors dreamed of subjugating the church, reducing the altar to a tool of the crown. In this world, Thomas Aquinas was not merely a professor. He was a combatant in a war without swords, yet with risks as mortal as those of the arena. The heretics attacked the root of Christian faith, the goodness of creation. For the Cathars, the body was a prison, marriage impure, the flesh an obstacle to the soul. Thomas answered with serene fury. He showed that the incarnation of Christ proved the opposite. If God took on flesh, then the world was not a curse, but a sacrament. His arguments were arrows of light against ancient shadows. Where the heretics proclaimed duality, Thomas raised unity, one God, one truth, one cosmos, created good. Meanwhile, in the universities, another enemy arose. The disciples of Averroes defended the idea that philosophy had its own truth, parallel to that of faith. This double truth was dynamite beneath the foundations of the church. If reason contradicted the gospel, which one reigned? Thomas did not flee from the challenge. In public disputations, he refuted with fierce patience. Truth does not oppose truth, he proclaimed, and he demonstrated that when reason is used rightly, it does not lead to error, but prepares the way for revelation. His opponents, expecting to find a naive friar, discovered instead a strategist capable of dismantling every objection like a general predicting the enemy's moves. But he did not face only schoolmasters. The throne of the Holy Roman Empire waged a veiled war against papal authority. Emperors sought to use faith as currency for power. Thomas responded in the most dangerous way, by writing about law and government. In his work, he outlined that human power is legitimate only if oriented toward the common good and subordinated to God's eternal law. It was dynamite thrown at tyrants. With words, he built a wall against kings who desired to be gods. These ideas unsettled many. Not a few princes and courtiers feared the audacity of that friar. By what authority did he speak of the power of kings? But Thomas did not seek to please. His pen was guided by the conviction that justice without God is nothing but violence. Thus, in the very heart of Christendom, he raised a political theory that placed limits on emperors. A simple Dominican dared to place restraints on crown and scepter. The tension grew. Rome, though it admired his clarity, also feared that such intellectual power might slip beyond control. Councils debated propositions that sounded dangerous. Universities drafted lists of theses to condemn. In Paris, surveillance was constant. Thomas walked between applause and suspicion, like a warrior advancing under invisible arrows. Each line written was a risk. Each lecture delivered a challenge. But he did not retreat. His strength lay not only in logic, but in spirituality. When facing heretics, he not only defeated them in debate, but showed a coherent life. He fasted, prayed, and wrote. He was a soldier who united prayer and argument. Many who hated him in public could not help but respect him in private. His presence imposed silence. Even his fiercest enemies recognized this man did not fight for his own glory, but for a greater cause, and there was yet another battlefield, the Eucharist. Some theologians reduced the mystery to a symbol. Thomas raised the doctrine of transubstantiation with the precision of a craftsman, not to indulge speculation, but to defend the heart of the faith. His hymns, composed with tears, became the confession of the Church. Christ is truly present in body and blood. This theology was not cold, it was burning. The friar who dismantled sophists with logic was the same who wept before the altar. The guests' clash raged on every front. Heretics, philosophers, emperors, even within the church itself. But Thomas stood firm. To him, every enemy was an opportunity to reveal truth more deeply. He never insulted, never mocked. He respected even errors, but demolished them with unbreakable solidity. His life was like a besieged fortress, attacked on all sides, but never conquered. In the end, his presence could no longer be ignored. Emperors feared him, heretics hated him, students revered him, Rome listened. The mind that had once been a prisoner in the Aquino castle now held the world, captive with its relentless logic. The dumb ox roared, and his roar echoed in courts, universities, and councils. No throne could silence it. No heresy could withstand it. Thomas had become the invisible combatant who shaped faith with weapons no empire could destroy. Thomas's battle did not end in debates or in treatises. Deep within him, there was a premonition. His life was a flame that burned quickly, yet illuminated vast horizons. At the height of his intellectual production, when his pen was raising cathedrals of thought, something unexpected happened. Thomas fell silent. The friar who had written thousands of pages, dictated entire volumes, suddenly spoke no more. Before the altar, after a profound mystical experience, he declared, "All that I have written seems like straw compared to what I have seen." Words that struck his disciples like an earthquake. The architect of reason confessed that the vision of God surpassed every human argument. That silence was not defeat. It was a hidden triumph. For while his works had built a fortress against error, his experience revealed that beyond every argument lies an encounter. Thomas did not deny the power of reason. He revealed its limits. The mind that seemed to govern both faith and empire bowed before a greater king, before whom logic itself bends. That gesture, far from weakening his legacy, made it indestructible. For he had never written out of pride, but out of obedience to the truth that transcends every pen. His death came early in 1274, while traveling to attend the Council of Lyon. Rome needed him. The world longed for his voice. But his body, exhausted by discipline and fasting, could endure no more. He fell along the road like a soldier dying in march, not in rest. He was buried among monks without royal pomp. Yet the news spread like fire. The greatest theologian of Christendom had passed. Universities mourned, friars wept, even enemies acknowledged an irreparable loss. The dumb ox spoke no more, yet his roar endured. And it endured. Decades later, the church canonized him, declaring a saint the one who had once been suspect in the eyes of many. In 1567, Pius V proclaimed him Doctor of the Church, sealing his place as a pillar of Catholicism. His work was not confined to monasteries. Kings, popes, philosophers, and jurists drank from his pages. Even intellectual enemies were forced to reckon with him. Western thought, from universities to parliaments, still bears the imprint of Thomas Aquinas. He never commanded armies, yet he commanded generations with the force of his mind. His legacy became a later battlefield. Protestant reformers debated his theses. Modern philosophers tried to dismantle him. Atheists mocked his faith, yet like a medieval fortress, the structure stood. In the 19th century, amid the chaos of modernity, Leo XIII restored Thomas as the church's official guide. It was like summoning an ancient general to lead new battles. His voice, already echoing for 600 years, continued to shape decisions and thought. No empire of stone lasted so long, but the mind of Thomas endured. Today, his influence extends beyond parishes and seminaries. Jurists cite his vision of the common good. Philosophers return to the clarity of his distinctions. Theologians draw on his synthesis to confront new dilemmas. Even those who reject him must still engage with him. Thomas Aquinas has become inevitable. Like a mountain on the horizon, he cannot be ignored. The boy once imprisoned in a castle, the friar once mocked as a dumb ox, had risen as a giant who strides across centuries. And yet, his greatest legacy is not only in books or theories. It lies in the testimony that reason and faith, when united, do not destroy, but elevate one another. It lies in the humility of acknowledging that the vision of God surpasses all words. It lies in the final silence, more eloquent than any treatise. The mind that seemed to govern an intellectual empire bowed before the mystery, showing that true wisdom is worship. As this chapter closes, the image that remains is of a man who faced heretics, philosophers, and emperors, yet ended on his knees before the altar. The one who challenged kings died a servant. The one who built systems declared them straw. His end was not erasure, but coronation. The silence of Thomas is a thunder that still resounds. No human power is absolute. No mind supreme before God. This is the victory no empire can erase. Thus, the saga of Thomas Aquinas does not end in death, but in eternity. His voice still teaches. His mind still governs. His faith still illuminates. He remains a sentinel at the gate of history, reminding us that the strongest power is neither sword nor crown, but truth. A truth that, as he showed, never divides, never corrupts, never fades. Centuries have passed since Thomas Aquinas walked through medieval cloisters. Castles have crumbled, empires collapsed, kings and popes forgotten. Yet the mind of Thomas continues to beat like the invisible heart of Western civilization. His synthesis of faith and reason has endured revolutions, wars, and crises, as if each page he wrote were a brick in a wall that defies time. Today, amid the whirlwind of ideologies, Thomas's voice still sounds like a trumpet, asking, "What is truth? What is the purpose of man? Who governs the destiny of the world?" In politics, his ideas on law and the common good still shape constitutions. In philosophy, his clarity remains a beacon against the darkness of relativism. In universities, his name lives on, not as a relic, but as a dialogue partner. Even those who oppose him, without realizing it, argue within his framework. Thomas has become like an inevitable mountain on the horizon. You may go around it, but you cannot ignore it. Yet what is most striking is not merely his intellectual force, it is his testimony of humility. The man who built immense systems declared that all was straw before God. In his final silence, he revealed a mystery no reasoning can capture. Truth is not a concept, but a person. That gesture still resounds as an urgent call. In a world that idolizes power, prestige, and technology, Thomas reminds us that wisdom begins on our knees before the Creator. This is why his story is not just memory, it is provocation. What do we moderns do with our reason? Do we use it to build or to destroy, to serve or to dominate? Thomas shows us that faith and reason need not be enemies, but allies. That governments only have legitimacy when they pursue justice. That man only finds meaning when he opens himself to the transcendent. These are not ancient lessons. They are the open wounds of the present. And if today the world boasts of its autonomy, Thomas casts a defiant shadow. All truth comes from God. If we reject that foundation, the edifice collapses. But if we embrace it, the human mind becomes a reflection of divine light itself. That is what made him not only a theologian, but an architect of civilization. Thus, this journey ends. Thomas Aquinas, the imprisoned boy, the dumb ox, the master of reason, the saint of silence. His life reminds us that the greatest battles are not fought on battlefields, but in the depths of mind and heart. And his victory is a warning. Empires pass, but truth remains. You are watching Faith and Power. If this story resonated with you, subscribe, share, and become a guardian of this flame. For the mind of Thomas has not been extinguished. And perhaps, at this very moment, it is whispering to your ear, "Seek the truth, and the world will be transformed."